Hello and welcome to a special edition of this programme. Now, since last September, France 24's Europe team has dedicated an entire series to levelling up. That's efforts to reduce disparities and inequalities across the European Union. We've travelled to Greece, Italy, Hungary, Romania, northern France, Bulgaria, the European Alps, and Guadeloupe in the French Caribbean. We've looked at highlands and islands, remote communities, and urban populations. Today we'll be playing you a few highlights from those reports and getting reactions and thoughts from our guest, Elisa Ferreira, the European Commissioner in charge of Cohesion and Reforms. So she actually oversees the support for and investment in the regions that we've been reporting from. Commissioner, welcome to the programme. You've warned about the risk of a very unbalanced future in Europe if some regions recover from this crisis quicker and others don't.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, cohesion policy has really worked. Even the World Bank recognizes it as the worldwide machinery that levels up. This does mean that everything is perfect. It means that everything is progressing. Now, different regions have to have different recipes, so to speak. But our work also anchors on the member states, because we are not a government, as you know. So member states also, they have got to take on board this objective, this target of leveling up certain regions and helping them to prepare the programs and projects. The other aspect I would like to underline, we just published recently a paper. We do a lot of them, but this is a staff document, as we call it. And it shows that when regions are kind of forgotten, left behind, also politically, they tend to feel, okay, if the system is too complex, too sophisticated, and I'm talking about the global economic system, the digitalization, if I cannot fit in, I cannot survive in this context, I'm against it.
So you think member states should accept changes to the long-term EU budget in order to put more money into levelling up, essentially?
I would say yes, but I would go a bit upstream.
Right.
Countries have got to consider and really to reflect on the cost of imbalances. This paper that was published is called the Geography of Discontent, bearing in mind and comparing with the regions that are trapped. And this is an important call, because I mean, if we want our democracies to keep running normally, we cannot leave people behind. Of course, Europe was so much aware of this, that a special fund and special instruments were created very early on, particularly with the impulse of, at that time, the United Kingdom, that needed this regional support for the industrial transition that they were going through in the 70s. But in fact, transition is going on. I mean, mastering transition is important, and helping those that cannot help themselves to have a little boost so that they can be integral part of an internal market based on competition.
Well, we spoke with the president of the EU's Committee of the Regions, who highlighted the need to protect cohesion funds and make sure they don't serve as an EU emergency cash cow. Let's take a listen to Vasco Cordero.
We need a cohesion policy as a long-term investment policy. This being said, we all understand and recognize why, in the current situation of the pandemic or war in Ukraine, you had to mobilize resources from cohesion policy to address those needs. But the fact is, and the expression I used in the first aid was, let us not transform extraordinary circumstances in the new normal. What is the new normal? What is my fear is that every time you have an emergency, you go and get money from cohesion policy. What kind of safeguards do we need for that? Well, mainly the assertion, the statement that cohesion policy is a policy that is intended and prepared and duly funded to address long-term needs and to prepare regions and cities, namely, for those situations.
Commissioner, is it time to make the investment rules actually less flexible to make sure that long-term recovery is safeguarded?
Well, I think Vasco Cordeiro, he is right in what he says. We are all very, very attentive to this. And in fact, it's an alert. The truth is that if we had not used cohesion funding to address the emergencies, because any crisis creates different disruptions in the different regions. So some regions would have collapsed. Some countries would have collapsed. In particular, those that depended on transport, or others that didn't have the capacity to have the health infrastructures on place. So, in fact, this is an important alert, but we don't need to change the rules. We reacted for COVID, and also from a health perspective, we paid ventilators, for instance, but we also supported jobs and supported small companies that otherwise would have collapsed. Then we did the same thing to help regions and municipalities to accommodate the inflow of refugees from Ukraine. Then we did something smaller also for the increase in energy costs. Okay, so we did it. I think we did the right thing. We had the unanimity of the Parliament. We had the Council. It's an important alert, but on the whole, it's about 10% or so of the total cohesion funding that was used for this emergency.
And speaking of supporting jobs and small companies, that's actually something that we saw as very important in an ultra-peripheral region that we visited, Guadeloupe, which is a French overseas territory. It's in the European Union. Take a look at a bit of this report from our own Luc Brown.
Saint-François in eastern Guadeloupe, one of 11 towns where 4 days a week, packs of bottled water are provided to residents.
Madame, oui? You take two.
To compensate for the regular water cuts.
They cut the water all the time. If you want to take a shower, you need bottled water. To cook food, you need bottled water. To be honest, it's a pain in the backside.
One regular beneficiary is Rosie Bellamour. Faced with the shortages, she uses seawater to flush her toilets and has to schedule her housework around the supply in the taps.
It's 8:10 now, and that's it, finished.
Until
tomorrow morning at 6 a.m.
After 5 decades of poor infrastructure maintenance, as much as 60% of Guadeloupe's drinking water leaks from its pipes. The EU has already invested €70 million in renovating the dilapidated network, with another 80 million due from 2021 to 2027, installing wider pipes as well as more resilient infrastructure. In 2021, the French authorities created a single entity to run Guadeloupe's water, and now Paris is imposing 6 technical assistants and a new director general to oversee progress. The new regime promising improvements by the end of the year, but admitting the task is vast.
The network is in a very poor state. We need to do €80 million of maintenance work each year for 10 years. Guadeloupe hasn't done that in years. So even if they gave us €1 billion today, we wouldn't be able to carry out the work this year.
Drinking water is only one part of the problem. 15 out of 17 of the island's water treatment plants don't work, many of them co-financed with EU money. In the meantime, much of the untreated waste is simply released into the Caribbean seas.
So, Commissioner, when you see that report, do you get the sense that the EU should be more involved in situations like this, perhaps more technical expertise, or should it just be left to member states like France in this situation?
It's a French region. So I don't know if you asked the same question to French government.
They've sent more technical staff.
Okay, but it's France.
Sure.
That is France. So that is the first stage.
Yeah.
From our side, we are through France answering the requests and demands, but we have got to solve the problem of the pipes that you correctly have underlined. You have got to have projects to prepare them, then to have the companies to implement them. So what I can assure you is that there is money for the region of Guadeloupe, for the region of Mayotte, for Martinique, for the situation of the French regions is quite different from the situation, outermost regions, is very different from the situation of the Portuguese or Spanish, Azores, Madeira, or they don't have the same problems. Also, among the different French outermost regions, situation in La Réunion is completely different. The situation in Martinique or in Guadeloupe or in Mayotte, I mean, the situations vary. What I can tell you about this is that we are very, very willing to support, but that you need local capacity of preparation of projects, of implementation of projects, and this is probably, I think, the core of the solution is to have technical capacity in the place, and I'm very glad that also in this little film you have shown the efforts that now France is doing to locate in this technical capacity at the place, because we cannot overtake France and go directly to support Guadeloupe.
Take your point. Well, we'll stop there for this first half of the programme, Commissioner Ferreira, but we'll be back, both of us, in part 2 to continue talking about cohesion or levelling up across the European Union with a few more extracts from our reports around the continent. Do join us in just a few minutes.